When I was a kid, my great-grandma would always sign us up for Christian camp that was set up near Stevens Pass in Washington. While there was plenty of Christian undertones, I didn't find it the least bit preachy and was having a lot of fun with it, even if there were some dumb rules in place. The way the campground was set up, we were tucked behind from a very scarcely populated dirt road. On the opposite side was a large field, giving way to a larger unkept reed and grass, and then endless stretches of forest that went deep into the mountains above. The lot was on the south side with the staff cabin on the edge of the dirt road and the southernmost part of the camp. The camper cabins were further north, some tucked away in lightly wooded areas while others boarding the large field alongside the camp outhouse. The outhouse was large. I would even call it a bathhouse if I had any baths. It had several toilet stalls, several urinals, and several shower stalls. The campground was big on its history, something I never bothered with during all my years there. To reflect this, the cabins were named after different cities in Washington, except for the oldest cabin in the land, called the Dean's Cabin for historical reasons. There was nothing special about it other than it was old. There seemed to be some lore about the place that seemed to evolve and change throughout the years. One year, Dean's cabins would be haunted. The next year, someone drowned in the swimming pool. The next year, someone would die at the playground. At first, it was kind of cool, but it got boring. I'm straying from my story. This story takes place the very first time I went to camp, when I was 6. My parents showed me to my cabin and helped me drop my bags off before giving me a $20 credit to use at the camp commissary to buy sweets with. My parents left and I sat around my cabin with some other strange boys my age until our counselor arrived. He introduced himself as Josh, and we played a game to break the ice and to get to know each other. Before we knew it, we were all breaking out of our shells and getting to know each other. The dinner bell rang and we all lined up to eat. Being allowed to enter one cabin at a time, since it was the inaugural dinner, the staff were listing out rules, most of which were no-brainers, but there were a few that I thought were kind of babyish. Things like, stay on the main trail, even though there were clear-cut shortcuts and forts people like to take and play in, or buddy up with another cabin mate at all times, or you can only spend $5 at commissary per day. I scoffed at the last one. There were so many good ice cream treats that started at $3, I would max out so fast. We ate dinner and went to the campfire to talk about the Bible and pray before bed, as would be ritualistic. Our cabin was an A-frame style cabin up against the woods and bordering the field separating us from the forest. Every night after campfire, we would just relax on the patio and watch the sunset until the staff came around and told us it was lights out. I've always had trouble sleeping in strange places, so I don't recall ever sleeping much at the camp. I even recall a couple times staying up all night because I needed to go to the bathroom, but was afraid of walking alone at night to the outhouse, and I didn't want to take my buddy or wake any of them up. As the days went on, I became more brave, eventually being brave enough to pee right outside the cabin door, just in case the monsters of little boys were ready to nab me off the front porch. I still think Josh was a large influence on why I don't fear the unknown as much as I used to. Whenever we did anything, he always found a way to spice it up and enrich the experience to make us more brave. The last night we were there, we played a large-scale game of hide-and-seek with the staff being the seekers and the campers and counselors hiding. I'd become sort of attached to Josh. He was like a cooler older brother. So, he put me in a tree and hid below the tree in a bush, and we never were found. The bell rang, signaling the end of the game, and to meet at the lodge to do a head count before returning to our cabins for the night. It was pitch black, but I was enthralled by how much fun I was having seemed to conquer my fear of the dark in such a remote place. I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Kids were running alongside us, some even managing cartwheels with nothing more than a flashlight to guide their hands and feet across the ground. Josh must have been inspired by everyone having such fun, and he said he had an idea for the final night of camp. We all got to the lodge and everyone was accounted for. They made their standard, "This is the last night of camp, so treasure your time with your cabin mates and get phone numbers," speech before running through the rolls one last time. "Can we sleep outside tonight?" Joss asked, to which the answer was a solid no. We didn't get an honest explanation why. It was just against the rules. Josh didn't take no for an answer, and when we got back to the cabin, he insisted we do it anyway. Everyone agreed with them, and we formulated a plan to act like we were in bed until the staff curfew came to make sure we were in bed. After the coast was clear, we slipped at the front door, bringing our pillows and sleeping bags with us. The field was completely empty and rather eerie looking in the night sky, with nothing but stars to light up the field. We made it about halfway before we heard panicked footfalls, and we dropped down by some nearby underbrush. It was a single staffer running clumsily over the uneven field. I smiled, amused that someone was so much older than me and was afraid of the dark. We decided to set up right up against where the taller, unkempt grass started. I guess sleeping bags would blend in better against them, making us harder to spot to anyone out wandering the campground at night. I laid there smiling, admiring the camaraderie of all our most daring act yet. I watched the stars about twinkling and casting a calm feeling over me as I listened to the sound of the crickets and frogs. Joss began to talk about God and all of creation, and I guess that's when I finally dozed off. I awoke to a completely silent field. I know it was the same one I'd fallen asleep in. It just somehow felt different. There was no longer a calming presence. I lifted my head to look at my cabin mates. Not one of them appeared to be awake. At the time, I had a mummy bag, and I imagined how ridiculous it must have looked to wake up and see this idiotic-looking worm staring at me. I smiled, rolling towards another cabin mate, Cody, my back against the reeds, and I fell asleep again. I woke up what felt like a few minutes later. There was a slight breeze brushing over the grass. It was calming. I started falling back to sleep when I heard the faint sound of what I could only imagine to be footfall through the long grass. My eyes shot open in panic. I waited to hear another, but it didn't seem to come. Just as I was closing my eyes again, I heard another. It was closer. The footfalls were steady. They were hard to hear, but sometimes I could pick them up, loud and clear. It was as if someone was sneaking through the grass but stumbling on the uneven ground. As the footsteps got closer, my heart began pounding in my chest. Eventually, it got to the point where the footfalls were deliberate and purposeful, as if whoever they belonged to were no longer caring if they were detected or not. The breeze shifted, blowing from behind me. A putrid smell washed over me, one that distinctly reeked of the copper scent of roadkill. Still facing Cody, my eyes began to water up in fear, but through the tears I could see his face stirring. His eyes fluttered open and suddenly shot up, transfixed on the grass behind me. The footfalls came closer this time. I could feel the presence of whatever they belonged to staring holes in the back of my head. It was menacing, an evil presence. I could almost feel its jagged intent of death. I couldn't imagine what Cody was looking at, but he laid there, face frozen in fear. The footfall stopped and the smell worsened as I heard heavy, labored breathing from right behind me. Cody wanted to scream, and I could tell. But even being as young as I was, I knew it would only end in two possibilities: the creature flee, or our deaths. I softly shook my head, making sure my mummy bag around me hadn't moved as I did so. He got the message but was still considering screaming or getting up to run. I really couldn't tell, but I wasn't as fast as a runner, so no matter what he decided to do, I was probably as good as dead. I think Cody made up his mind before he could do anything. Another of our cabin mates groaned and shifted in his sleep. I heard an almost human guttural snarl from right behind me. The creature had made up its mind. It was going to attack, and it was going to be messy. I could imagine it hunkering down for the leaping attack as the grass shifted behind me. screwed my eyes shut and prepared for the end, when suddenly a pack of coyotes called out in the forest behind the field. The snarling ceased and the grass shifted once more. There were several noisy footsteps, getting further and further away, taking the stench with them. I opened up my eyes and Cody was staring behind me, less scared but obviously frightened. "Is it gone?" I mouthed. He nodded ever so slightly. Neither me nor Cody slept that night. We didn't speak a word about it until it was time to leave camp for the year. I approached him before he left and asked what he had seen. He described a very malnourished-looking humanoid. He had the legs and torso of a man, but the head was that of a decapitated deer. It looked like it put it over a young one. His arms were that of a dog's, but when it was preparing to attack, the creature unsheathed some long, lion-like claws. He said he had told Josh, but Josh never believed him. I've never seen Cody again. I never got to ask Josh about the encounter since he unfortunately lost his life in the Middle East. I've only shared this story once. People have told me it could have been a Wendigo. I've been back several times after this incident, and I haven't found anything else as bizarre as that night.
During the 70s, my family used to regularly go to campgrounds in our StarCraft pop-up camper, mostly up to Wisconsin or Western Illinois. One campground we went to, when I was about 11 or 12, had a large pond in the middle of it, with a forested area on one side and a beach section with a rickety old pier on the opposite side. I remember it being sunny and sort of chilly, and in the morning, because just before I walked to the pond, my mom made us pancakes in the camper for breakfast. I walked to the pond and onto the pier that went out about 10 or 15 feet into the pond, and was noticing how clear and still the water was. I saw a couple of small fish and was spitting into the water and watching the fish come up for it. I happened to glance across the pond to a line of trees on the other side, which was probably 75 to 100 feet from where I stood, and saw what I thought was a tree of 6 or 7 feet high that was burnt black about 10 feet out from the tree line, surrounded by shrubs and weeds. I resumed looking for fish near the pier, and a few minutes later looked back up across the pond and noticed the tree almost appeared to be nearer by 3 or 4 feet. I moved to the other side of the pier and began looking at a couple of ducks swimming quietly by past the pier. When I looked back across the pond, the tree was gone. I thought for a second that maybe I didn't really see what looked like a blackened tree, and my eyes were perhaps playing tricks on me. Just as I was about to turn and begin walking off the pier toward the dirt path back to the camper, I heard something from the other side of the pond and looked over, and my heart jumped into my throat. There was a figure, all black and seemingly featureless, but now clearly humanoid in shape, at the water's edge, directly opposite from where I stood, slowly waving its arms over its head, as if trying to get my attention. I stared shocked for what seemed minutes, as I silently and mechanically waved, but was probably just a few seconds. Something about it was very ominous and gave off a something is not right vibe. The figure suddenly was still, and I was just about to call across, "Hello," when it shot forward rapidly into the water in a straight line until it was below the surface. I didn't stay around any longer to see any more, running as fast as my legs would take me down the path that led me back to our family's camper. About a quarter mile away, I didn't tell my parents or sisters what I had seen at the pond, as I didn't think they'd believe me, since I would have a hard time believing it if it wasn't me who had seen what I saw in that pond. My name is Danny, and I am a college student. I live in an Asian country. Today, I will share my experience which happened about 5 years ago in 2013, when I was in the 9th grade. I was 15 years old when me and my cousin decided to ditch school and explore the woods, which were not very far from the school. We had heard different stories and rumors about the woods involving paranormal, demons, and strange creatures. There were many incidents reported in the woods. Once, a 14-year-old boy disappeared in the woods and later was found 6 or 7 days later, unconscious. But later he recovered, but had trouble sleeping. Another case was about a boy who was lost and missing for almost 2 weeks and was found. But, creepy part is, he was just 10 years old. So how did he manage to stay alive for 2 weeks alone there? His house was near the woods on the hills, and his family said, we asked him about why he went into the woods, and he said he heard some whispers which told him to explore the woods. Later, his family moved from that house because it was not very far from those woods. They said they always felt uncomfortable in that house, and felt like there was something sinister lurking near. So I decided to explore them one day, but I was not going alone, so I convinced my cousin Ali to come with me. We had a motorbike and took 30 minutes to reach the woods up to the hills. The weather was quite dark and chances of rain were possible. We parked the bike near a bush and locked it and started walking because the track was high and edgy and our bike would not be able to cover it. The woods were so dark because the trees were close enough to each other that light could not really penetrate them. And the clouds were getting dark also. When we were getting high up through there, it was a strange feeling of being watched and stalked, and my cousin was also nervous because he was a good and regular student who did not like to ditch class. I convinced him to come because he is far more brave and courageous than me. The further we went, there was this strange feeling that I just don't know how to explain. It's like we were not alone. But then, I said to myself, I'm just overthinking this. But my cousin noticed something strange. The ravens on the trees. He told me about it, but it was not a big deal as I told him they were just crows, and they all lived in the woods. But he seemed confused and told me about the strange silence. I began to freak out as he said this. How could I not have noticed? The ravens were almost on every branch of the tree. They were in many numbers, which was the first thing that freaked me out. And second, they were so quiet. Yes, all of them just sitting there and staring. It was really odd because their behavior was not normal. They were not making any noises as crows would. I was scared shitless because in our culture, crows and ravens are considered demonic and are a sign of something bad. And all of them, just quite like this, was the main reason we both started to get scared. I told him we should go back, but this time he was the one who wanted to explore further, and I wanted to go back. I tried to convince him that we would forget our way back and could not get lost in the woods. But he said, I know the way back, and just said just a little bit further, and we'll go back. As he was not easily scared, I was feeling very uncomfortable, and I could feel the strange presence with us. We went further, and I was really scared. I was not looking on the trees anymore because the ravens were so silently staring at us. It was just the scariest moment of my life. There was a mysterious feeling I would get whenever I looked at them, just staring into my mind. After 10 minutes, my cousin spotted a string of big old trees. It had this strange feeling to them. This was the moment I lost complete sanity and freaked out. He said it's just a well, and it's already been 1 hour and 30 minutes and I'm tired of walking. He said, you were the one that wanted to explore. Just stay here for 10 minutes, let's examine this well and tree. There was nothing else I could do to convince him. Later, he told me something that sent shivers down my spine. The tree had symbols carved into it. There were strange symbols. Then he said, I don't know a lot about dark magic and stuff, but it's definitely black magic. He was damn sure of it, and the tree was really old, maybe centuries old, from the looks of it. There was a weird symbol resembling a dark bird. It had a long beak and of course, it was a raven. And my cousin was also losing his shit but was also not easily scared. We had heard about the strange creatures, paranormal and demons in the woods, but really didn't believe it. But at this moment, what if the reports about the woods were true? I was so damn freaked out. We had a good look, and we didn't find anything else, and it was starting to get dark. Suddenly, we heard a raven caw, and the creepy thing was, we didn't hear it come from the raven. Yes, we were pretty sure it was not the raven in the trees that it made that noise. We both agreed it was time to leave, and we went down the hill as fast as we could. We decided to say screw it and throw one stone into the well. Later, we would hear more weird sounds start coming from the well, like someone was crying or weeping, and some weird sounds I couldn't explain. It also started raining, but the ravens didn't move from their place. Not one bit. They were just so silent and staring us up and down, which was the creepiest thing to me. We were already creeped out and decided to go back when something made my heart pound. Someone or something whispered. I couldn't understand what it said, but it was really, really creepy. I asked my cousin if he heard it, and he said he did. My mind was thinking about the stories about the boys who had incidents in these woods, which I stated earlier. We started to run wildly, because the long trail ahead of us was not gonna sit any shorter if we didn't go. It was also raining. I was the one behind, my cousin was sprinting away way faster than I was. The ground was slippery, and I couldn't run fast in my weird shoes. I shouted at my cousin to slow down a bit, and then came my worst nightmare in reality. The ravens started making noises, and I was getting scared shitless. I never feared for my life that much until that day. Then, I started feeling heavy, like something was trying to stop me or pushing me back. I shouted, started freaking out. Something was happening to my legs. I felt like they were not attached to me anymore. My stomach dropped. I started feeling heavy, and then all of a sudden, there was a whisper into my ear. It sounded like giggling. Then I was blacked out, and then all became black. I fell on the ground, and that's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, I was out of the woods near our motorbike, lying on the ground. My cousin was there yelling. He was asking me what happened and why I fell down, and I told him something with a sinister voice whispered, and all became blurry, and then I blacked out. He had to carry me all the way out. I was unconscious for almost 2 hours. My clothes were all muddy because I fell down, and due to the rain, we had to go to our school and clean ourselves. Our classmates asked us why we were so dirty, but we didn't tell them because they would think we were crazy. But I now know the many stories about the woods involving missing people and witchcraft are definitely true.
I grew up in Iowa, and up until recently, fireworks were illegal. That didn't stop many of my friends and I from jumping across the Mississippi into Wisconsin and buying them. After buying them, we would simply drive around an old, rarely used backcountry road to find the perfect spot to fire them off. We did this for many years with no issue, until one year, things simply got kind of weird. So, my friends and I bought our fireworks and had found a great spot to shoot them off in the middle of nowhere. We were enjoying the show when one of my friends asked if one of us from the group went into the woods to go to the bathroom or something. We looked around and everyone was accounted for and asked him why. He pointed to the distance where a green glow was and asked what we thought it may have been. We figured it was the property owner or something and stayed quiet and watched while the glow came closer. Eventually, it got close enough to where we could tell that it wasn't someone carrying a flashlight or anything because the orb the glow was coming from seemed to move too fast and smooth for someone to be walking through the woods. All of a sudden, one of my stupid friends decided it would be funny to fire bottle rockets in a Roman candle in its direction to see what it would do. and all of a sudden, the glow moved to the bottom of the hill towards us faster and smoother than any man could move. We started to freak out, and another friend had a CCW and was carrying his pistol with him. He yelled out that he would stop shooting off fireworks and apologize, and he needed to identify himself. He heard something that I can only describe as putting your head right up against a speaker as it's giving feedback from a microphone. We put our hands on our ears, and my friend draws his pistol and fires 2 rounds at the orb's direction. That only seemed to make it come towards us even faster, so we jumped in our cars and sped off as fast as we could. I don't know what that was, but I'm sure it wasn't someone simply carrying a green flashlight.